Hello everyone, welcome back to Small Room Audio. Today we are going to be looking at this, the NAD M23, which is a stereo power amplifier. Now, a stereo power amplifier is possibly one of the hardest things to review because it doesn't do very much. No, it will amplify your signal, that is pretty much it. However, the way in which it does it, the quality of that amplification, and any sort of character or colouring is worth talking about because that can aid your system or not, depending on what you're looking for. And as we know, synergy is really important when you build a really good quality hi-fi system. You've got to get it just right for your personal taste, for your speakers, for your source, etc, etc. And the amplifier is a big part of that. Now, this is a Class D amplifier. It puts out 380 watts into 4 ohms, 200 watts into 8 ohms, so it's got tons of power, and it's using the Purifi modules. This is, on the face of it, very similar to the NAD C298 that I reviewed last year. Same modules, slightly different makeup of power inside, and you might think, why would I want to pay almost double from the C298 to get the M23? We'll cover that off today, and we'll also talk about the improvements that have been made to the M23 over the C298, and we'll talk about how and why you might use this, and also why I think this unit here could travel an awfully long way with you on your audiophile journey. It really is rather good. Let's start though at the beginning. We know that it costs £3,399. As I say, that is almost double the C298, which retails at £1,749.99, I think, something around there. But on first look at it, you will see that it is a lot prettier than the C298. The box is, well, it's not boxed anymore. The C298 was just a black box. This has got really nice casework, the silver here, the black on the front, the little details. It's got a nice sort of window to the amp here as well, although it does run cool, so that window there isn't really for airing it out to make sure it stays cool, because it is cool as Class D. And on the back you've got this lovely sort of copper line going here along where you've got the speaker terminal outputs, which are fairly standard outputs. They're not like, you know, fancy ones, but they're nice, nice and will do the job, sound good. You've got the inputs, which can be, of course, balanced, and if you want to, you can have single-ended. And on the bottom here, you can swap between the two with a little flip switch. You've got gain level, which can go low, medium, or high. That's a bit different to the C298, which had a little turning knob. This actually is a bit easier. You can just kind of say, yeah, do I want low gain, medium, high, etc., to match with your preamp. And you've got, again, single-ended and balance for the right channel and the left channel separate rather than kind of one or the other. I don't think you would run half of it balanced and half of it single-ended, would you? But it's quite nice. You've got these little flip switches, and they do feel very satisfying to flip. I do like a good switch on an audio piece of equipment. You've just got the power in with the little switch there, and that's it, isn't it? Because this is a stereo power amplifier. Doesn't do any much more than that. There's no preamplifier stage, there's no volume control, there is no DAC in here. It is just an amplifier. Why is it good though? Why should you consider this on your audiophile journey? Well, let me tell you this much. This does not add very much in terms of colour. This just lets things through. So if you've got a very nice source, such as a beautiful tube preamp, maybe something from Prima Luna or Macintosh or Supratech from Australia or Audio Note or something like that, guess what? You're going to hear the sound of that preamp through this. It does not add colour to proceedings at all. In fact, if you've got a lovely source, so you know, great CD player, great DAC, your analog source is fantastic, you're really happy with your preamp and how that all comes together, again, you're just going to hear it as the front end determines through, of course, the character and colour of your speakers that you've chosen as well. So why is that good? Surely you want this to do a bit more than that, right? Well, no, not really, because if you think about synergy in building an audiophile system, there are so many variables. This is why audiophiles can very rarely agree with each other, because apart from the room, which is probably the biggest variable of all, You've got the power amp, you've got the preamp, you've got tubes, or you've got solid state. You've got Class D, A, B, or A. You've got CD players, you've got DACs. You've got analog rather than digital. You've got network controls. You've got, dare I say, interconnects and speaker cables and power cables, reconditioners. Oh, there's so much that you can do to tweak your system. So when we're talking about a component, it's very difficult because we'll have a different experience of it as audiophiles in our unique circumstances. But what the M23 does is it says, here's a ton of power. It doesn't matter if your speakers are hard to drive or not. This will drive them. You only need one, you don't need to go monoblock, but if you had really hard to drive speakers, you could run it in monoblock as well, but you know, 380 into 4 ohms is an awful lot of power. So I think you'd be hard pressed unless you had a concert hall for a living room to need more. Yes, it's Class D, and we'll get to that in a minute, because Class D in the past has been seen as perhaps a little grainy, very thin, not particularly pleasant in comparison to A, B and A. And I do have a Class A integrated amplifier behind me, which is the Luxman 595, and yeah, the character of these two amplifiers is different. If you've got a cheap power amp, or not a very good one, shall we say, it doesn't have to be cheap, but just not particularly good one, you might find that the coloration isn't that pleasant. Maybe it's veiled, to use a very esoteric audiophile term. Perhaps it is very bright. Again, you know, it's very thin. It's things that you wouldn't necessarily associate with what you would want. As you go up the value chain to maybe really high-end stuff, colour kind of comes back into it. We say maybe the item is more neutral or transparent to the source, but often high-quality stuff does bring a colour to it. So the Luxman behind me here, that gives you a feel for, actually there's a little bit of beautification at the top end. It's very smooth. The frequency response kind of extends a little bit further, you feel, than other amplifiers at the top and the bottom. Other pieces might give you a bit more of a V shape to your sound, you know, sort of rock and roll sound, if you like, a bit more of the clip sound, but you can also get that within electronics as well. The M23 is not doing any of that acrobatics at all. It's not giving you any of that kind of tubey bloom. It's not giving you a sense of a bigger soundstage. It's whatever's in the recording you're going to hear with this. This system, oh sorry, this amplifier measures extremely well. It's got very, very, almost non-existent levels of THD. So the distortion here is absolutely zero, pretty much. It is brilliantly designed. It's those modules that do that. But there is a character to the M23. So in the same sense that there is a character, I think, pretty much to everything. So it's quite authoritative. Bass is fast. It is very fluid in its sound. It's smooth sounding. It's not grainy. The mid-range, in comparison to the C298, doesn't feel like it's been warmed up. It is extremely neutral, extremely clear. There's a lot of clarity here, and would be best suited to systems that require that feeling of clarity rather than needing to kind of thicken or richen things up. You know, if you want to add some sugar to your coffee, that's where you're going, perhaps to a tube amp or something like that. With the M23, no, that's not going to do it. In fact, the character of it is probably a little bit thinner than maybe my Luxman behind me. The Luxman adds a little bit more richness, like I say, but not as much as you know, a really old school romantic tube amp. So if it's got a character which says, I've got authority, I've got control, you know, it doesn't matter if you've got big bass drivers or you've got small ones, it's going to really grip those tight and be very quick on that response. Transients are also quick. Speed is something that this does very well, but it won't romanticize poor recordings. It won't tell you that the music you're listening to is somehow, you know, in a different space, or widen or deepen the soundstage any more than it's in the recording. But that's all right, isn't it? Because if we're taking out one of these horrible variables, well, not horrible variables, we love variables in audiophile world, don't we? We like to play with things and muck things about, but it can be a bit frustrating at times because you've got to manage all this stuff together. And when you change one thing, it can all sort of start to fall apart a bit. And with the M23, it's consistent. It's going to say whatever you put in front of it, it's going to put out of it. So if you've got a lovely preamp and your future says, I'm going to, you know, make my DAC better, or make my preamp be a focal point of my upgrade path. Well, actually, this is going to go with you an awfully long way. You don't need to kind of upgrade this really until you get to crazy high-end levels, because it's going to show you what you put in. I'm hammering home this point because it's really important. The neutrality and transparency of this is fantastic, and it's really its strongest selling point. Music that I really liked on it, well, it was across the board really. I mean, I quite liked a little bit of pop music and dance music through it because it had good rhythmic timing and drive, but that's probably because there's so much power, right? It doesn't lack for that enthusiasm or delivery that gets your foot tapping. Where it might fall down, I think, is probably twofold. Firstly is if you do really like a romantic sound, if you focused purely on that sort of mid-range magic, you are better suited potentially to get, you know, a slightly different, more colourful amplifier that will deliver that for you. Although if you had a really nice audio note, rich sounding preamp in front of this and an analog system, you'd probably still get that because it's just going to pass it through. So, you know, I don't think you're going to miss out on it entirely, but it wouldn't be my first stop. Also, if you have very sensitive speakers, you know, 95 dB plus in your range of clips, you're a big Tannoy Kensington or something like that, you probably don't need this much power. You could go Fleetwood amps if you want to, and you could even go single-ended. And sometimes that delivers a more nuanced and flavourful sound, which will put your salt and pepper on top of your chips and make you a very happy camper indeed. This won't do that. This will simply amplify what you've put in front of it. I think as well with the M23, the major issue I have with it is the price. Because how is it better than the C298? Well, it is better because it is that touch more neutral, and it deals with decay in a much more natural way. So if you look back at my C298 review, the only real criticism I was levelling at that was it was a bit ugly. This isn't. This looks high-end. I'd show this off to my friends. I think it's really lovely. But the main problem for me with the C298 was decay felt a little bit clipped. So if you had a drum hit or a string that kind of got played, that reverb, that natural decay in the room, it wasn't quite on point. And if you're a fastidious audiophile and you get a bit annoyed by those things, which I did, it just won't cut it. And that's where I was kind of led to. I think if I was massively into EDM, I wouldn't look any further from the C298. If there weren't recordings where I was wanting to hear that in-room decay, C298 from NAD, killer amplifier, and a killer price, frankly, as well for what you get. This is not at a killer price. This puts it right up there with high-end gear. And is it worth it? Well, yes and no. I kind of feel like if it was £1,000 cheaper, I would be even more enthusiastic about this unit. But as it stands, there are so many choices in and around £3,500 that really it's down to sort of your personal subjective choice. Do you want to get this and travel with you because you love your preamp, you love your source, or actually do you want to add some colour to your system because you're missing something? That's where you've got to kind of think, yes, no, do I value clarity or do I value richness? If it's richness, it ain't this. If it's clarity, absolutely it is. So yeah, as always in audio, you pick the things that you like, but this is an exceptional power amplifier. It is brilliantly well made, but it's a bit pricey. And I think that's probably how I'd sum it up. Great quality, but definitely not double the quality of the NAD C298. And whether you think it's worth the money is entirely going to be down to your system, your variables, and what you like. I think that pretty much sums it up. If you like this video, please do like and subscribe. We do appreciate it. I put my teeth back in. We really do appreciate it. And we also have super thanks down the bottom somewhere as well. So if you'd like to buy us a coffee for taking the time to do the listening and reviewing stuff, that's very much appreciated as well. But don't feel obliged to. We do this because it's fun. We don't earn much money doing it. It is just a hobby. We've got proper jobs, you know, like proper working folk. But we're going to continue to do it because it's what we are passionate about, and we know from all the lovely comments that you put down below that you like what we do too. So thank you very much for coming along the ride, and we will see you back here very soon.